Hey guys, what's crackin'? Godsman here, coming at you with another top 10 list. Today we'll be taking a quick break from the top 10 boss unit video series as the Pale Moon one needs a little bit more time in the oven. So in the interest of keeping consistent and not being a one-trick pony, I decided to shake things up a bit and make a top 10 about a different subset of unit cards, that being the stand triggers. Now, stand triggers were a mechanic first introduced in BTO 1 Descent of the King of Knights, having been a part of the game since its very inception until the end of the G era, with the reboot into V series doing away with this now archaic mechanic. And that's a good thing, as stand triggers would ultimately become one of the most abusable aspects of deck building, resulting in many stand loops and other horrendous strategies beget by their unique unit effects. But let me take a quick step back and explain what stand triggers even do for those of you who aren't familiar. As the name implies, stand triggers allow the player to select one of their rear guards and stand it when trigger checked. As one would imagine, this trigger is very offensively inclined, as standing a unit during the opponent's turn wasn't very impactful outside of pissing off a Mega Colony player or something. Initially, stand triggers were an interesting facet of deck building as most decks in early Vanguard lacked inherent multi-attack options, which wasn't terribly busted at first due to the downsides, of which there were a few, such as having to swing with a rear guard first to even get the benefit of the stand trigger, and also the inherent RNG reliance of needing to check stands at the right time for optimal combat. However, this would become progressively more insane with time, as deck compression would make stands more reliable, and high-powered rearguards making them more deadly. This would peak with the existence of stand loops, wherein rearguards capable of drive checking would restand themselves with stand triggers, only to then attack again, and check more stand triggers, and attack again, and keep on going. This ultimately forced Bushiroad to release a new game rule which prevented rearguards which were stood by stand triggers from drive checking for the rest of that turn. So again, it's a very good thing that Bushiroad didn't carry these things over after the reboots. But the other problematic aspect of stand triggers, and the thing this video will be comparing today, are their unique effects. Whereas most critical, draw, and heal triggers were either vanilla or possessed archetypal effects, Bushiroad experimented with the concept of stand triggers with entirely unique and powerful skills themed around their respective clans. While this was certainly great for granting extra tools to the 24 clans, this also led to disastrous results at times, as many of these stand triggers would enable game-breaking combos. And in today's video, we'll be taking a look at which stand triggers were the most impactful of the bunch. And believe me, there were a great deal of powerful stand triggers, so narrowing it down to 10 was quite the feat, but I'm real happy with the list here, and I think you will be too. But before we get into said list, if you're looking for more Vanguard content like this, then definitely subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I intend to complete the top 10s for every clan, so if there's a clan you liked and I haven't done it yet, then you'll want to turn on that bell so you don't miss out when I upload. Now without further ado, let's begin. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick honorable mention here, just the one this time, that being Steam Battler Erwatar. Releasing in GBTO 5, Steampunk Ise here had this skill. Auto Generation Break 1, put this unit on the bottom of the deck. When this unit is put into your bind zone from rear circle, you may pay the cost. If you do, draw 2 cards, choose a card from your hand, return to the deck, and shuffle. For those of you who know the power of Erwatar and wondering why he's only an honorable mention, all I can say is that's just indicative of the absurdity of the stand triggers on this list. Anyway, Erwatar was a card that gave a big boost in consistency by constantly digging cards from deck. This also allowed the player to deck compress by returning itself and perhaps another trigger from hand back to the deck and shuffling. Even the shuffling itself is huge, as it already resets the RNG of your deck without needing another effect to initiate the shuffle. Meta-wise, it was a staple in many Gear Chronicle decks, particularly the Time Leap decks which ravaged the Strike Gate and early G-Next metagame. He was a part of basically all of them. Ultimately, he would get put to 1 in the restriction list for his ease of use and abuse. That's right, we're only at the freaking honorable mention, not even the main list, and we already have a card worthy of the restriction list. Yeah, stand triggers sure were a thing, weren't they? Only reason he's an honorable mention is that despite being a part of many topping decks and being a very solid card, his benefits are rather tamed compared to the monsters above him, so he's just not quite busted enough to make the top cut, but I would be remiss to not bring up this guy. At number 10 is quite the fabulous feline, Monochrome of Nightmare Land. Releasing all the way back in GBTO 3, Monochrome had this skill. Act on the rear circle, Generation Break 1. Put this unit on top of the deck. Shuffle, Soul Charge 1, and if you have 6 or more cards in the soul, choose a card from the damage zone, turn it face up. Then, if you have 10 or more in the soul, draw a card. Monochrome was a ridiculous card that G-Dark Irregular got right off the bat in set 3. Since this card was not a hard once per turn, you could spam this unit to get multiple counter charges, soul charges, and draws. This made Counterblast effectively a free resource for Dark Irregular. Like, seriously, it was as though DI never had more than a CB or 2 face down in the entire game throughout G. It felt as though you were playing against V Angel Feather or something. Counterblast basically meant nothing for these guys. And as we know from my previous top 10 video, DI was just a little ridiculous, so this cat making everything free was just too much, dude. It would also be extra abusable Mouse, who could shuffle these guys back into the deck, only to check them again during your double Vanguard swing for a flurry of attacks that make Aquaforce jealous. And to think this card barely made 10th place, man, we're in for a long list. At number 9 is Mick the Ghosty and Family. Released from its grave in GPT-06, Mick and friends had these skills. Auto, Hollow. Hollow is a keyword which states that when this unit is placed on rear circle, you may have it become hollowed. If you do, retire at the end of the turn. And then second skill, Auto on the Generation Break 1, when this unit is placed on rear circle from drop zone. If this unit is hollow, choose up to one of your other units and it gets 10,000 power to end of turn. And until end of turn, this unit gets Auto when this unit is put into the drop zone from rear circle, return to the deck, and shuffle. So at first glance, Mick might not seem that bad. Sure, it gave a solid power boost and returned itself back to deck to potentially get drove checked again, but that can't be all, right? And indeed, you would be right. There's a more nefarious reason for Mick's inclusion. Simply put, Mick's main point of abuse wasn't even as an offensive tool, but a defensive one, as Bushiroad made the mistake of not limiting that 10k power up to just during your turn. Oops! This meant that anything that could call Mick during the opponent's turn could grant your Vanguard a defensive 10k bonus, which amounted to 2 defensive triggers during G, so that was a ginormous power boost at the time. This all culminated in Bushiroad hitting Mick on the restriction list. Yep, that's 2 cards that got hit on the restriction list, and we're only at number 9. Oh dearie me. At number 8, we actually have a Monochrome unit this time, this being Stealth Dragon Hiden Scroll. Releasing the same set as Monochrome, GPT-03, Hiden Scroll had this effect. Auto Generation Break 1, put this unit on top of the deck. When this unit is placed on rear circle, you may pay the cost. If you do, choose a rear card not named Hidden Scroll, search your deck for up to 2 cards with the same card name as that unit, call them the rear circle, shuffle, and then bot deck them at the end of the turn. So Hidden Scroll is like all these cards in that it was pretty effing ridiculous. For the low cost of putting this trigger back into your deck, you could double Shadow Clone any other rear guard of your choice. Yeah. So the deck recycling advantage is there, but most of the other cards we've talked about so far will and have done that. So why is Hiden higher? Well, that's because he was a part of a loop. When paired with cards like Stealth Rogue of Concealment Tanba, you could get a constant flurry of attacks that could pump up Tanba's power to astronomical numbers. This ultimately led to Tanba getting banned, while Hiden Scroll got to still walk the earth and be a massive multi-attack extender for the clan. Yay. Still, while it's not legal anymore, that loop's prior success and its continued existence as a free extender of multi-attacks makes Hiden a cinch for 8th place. Landing at the number 7 spot is Prankster Girl of Mirrorland, a Pale Moon card. Releasing in GPT-05 alongside Urwatar, Prankster Girl had this skill. Auto Generation Break 1, put this card on top of the deck. When this card is put into your soul, you may pay the cost. If you do, search your deck for up to 1 card not named Prankster Girl Mirrorland, put in the soul, and shuffle the deck. To think that such a cute character like Prankster Girl could cause such harm, but make no mistake, countless souls have been lost to this cute girl. From the get-go, Prankster Girl is a hell of a card. Pale Moon as a clan has always been at its strongest when it can assemble the right cards and soul for its various wombo combos. So as you might imagine, this card had degenerate applications as with most of these stand triggers. For Prankster Girl in particular, her biggest offense was being a key consistency piece in Songster Loop. In essence, the Songster Loop made nigh infinite attacks by comboing her call skill with Flying Periton and the Cray Elemental tier. And the thing that made this consistent was Prankster Girl, fetching those pieces from deck to soul when it itself was put into soul. This ultimately led to the banning of Visible Songster in the 2021 Premium Slaughter list, meaning that Prankster Girl gets to walk scot-free just like Hidden Scroll. Very cool. Now at number 6 is a card that I actually like. Releasing in GPT-04, Dreaming Dragon is that card, and after reading this effect, you'll see why. So, Auto Rear Circle Generation Break 1. Put this unit on top of your deck. That's a pretty consistent effect. At the end of your turn, you may pay the cost. If you do, return all cards in your drop zone to your deck and shuffle your deck. Then if 10 or more were returned, draw a card. The ultimate anti-deck out tool, Dreaming Dragon is perhaps the biggest crutch in the Genesis clan. Dreaming Dragon solved the clan's #1 issue of decking out, and it did it in an absurd way. Remember Blangwing Tybalt from my DI list? Yeah, imagine having that deck refresh, but not being archetype locked, or even having to stride it. Dreaming Dragon doesn't just remove Genesis' biggest weakness, it also turns it into a strength. In addition to constant refreshing, making the clan effectively immortal, you could also deck compress like crazy with this card by deliberately only leaving triggers and drop from guarding and soul blasting. Although not the direct proponent of any loop shenanigans, Dreaming Dragon is the dream, and is so radically game-breaking for its deck that it gets a spot here from the raw absurdity of its skill alone. It's okay, buddy. I still love you. Alright, we're at the Big Five, and with the Big Five comes some real pieces of work, let me just say. Kicking it off is Operator Girl Linka, releasing in GCHO2, aka Character Booster 2, We Are Trinity Dragon! Linka had this skill. Burst. Act on the rear circle, Generation Break 2. Put this unit to soul. If your Vanguard's power is 20,000 or greater, draw. Then if it's 35 or greater, choose your Vanguard with the burst ability, and until end of turn, it gets on the Vanguard circle, Soul Blast 1. When your drive check reveals a grade 3, choose a Sentinel on your opponent's Guardian circle, and that unit's effects with cannot be hit are nullified. This card is just ridiculous. I mean, just coming off a Dreaming Dragon who was Tibbled as a stand trigger, we now have Linka, who was a freaking Daikaiser as a stand trigger. I don't even think I need to explain this one. It's a card that can flat out kill Sentinels in your deck, which could potentially one-shot the opponent with some of these absurd strides that you have at your disposal. And like Dreaming Dragon was to Genesis, Linka helps combat perhaps DP's biggest nemesis of all time, Perfect Guards. And although it is limited to Vanguards with the burst ability, that still applies to two of the clan's most powerhouse strides, that being Bravest Peak Excalibur and freaking Unibird Galaxy. And it gets worse. Since it gives your Vanguard the skill, you can use this on both attacks from Excalibur and Commander Laurel D. Oh, and on top of that, it's a skill that can be given multiple times. So now we can stack the Daikaiser effect. Lovely. And let's not forget V Daikaiser can also just chill out on rear circle with his skill active while you're doing all this. God, why even guard at that point? Like seriously, you can't look me in the eye and tell me that with 4 to 5 drive checks in a grade 3 heavy deck with Heal Guardians that they won't hit one grade 3, and you only need one grade 3 for all those effects to go off. And if it wasn't due to the burst Vanguard restriction and the existence of G Guardians with PG-esque effects, then this card would have been a meta buster. And even as it is now, this card is an absolutely absurd OTK enabler that could flat out win games for you. Welcome to the top 5. At the unlucky number 4 is, fittingly, a card most cursed. Cursed Eye Raven, the Shadow Paladin representative of this list. Releasing in GPT-03, the same set as Hiden Scroll and Monochrome, set 3 stonks, boy, Raven had this skill. Act on the rear circle, Generation Break 1. Rest this card and put this unit on top of your deck. Shuffle your deck. Look at 2 cards from the top of your deck, search for up to 2, and call them to separate open rear circle as rest, and then put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your deck in any order, and at the end of that turn, retire the units called with this effect. Raven was not as initially as big of a deal as a lot of these other stand triggers. Its call was free, and it could stack some powerful cards, but it wasn't until Luard that folks realized the true potential of the Raven. Like with most of these cards, Raven could return itself to deck, and with a deck capable of massive deck compression like Luard, this led to vicious multi-attack potential, but there's so much more here at play. The real key with Raven was its ability to superior call incessantly. Thanks to cards like Grolsne, these calls would convert into power, and when checked as a trigger would restand these massive beaters of its own creation. Luard also had multiple tricks to muster his ravens en masse. Dragheart himself would call 2 ravens with a stride skill, and Fodla could do the same with her skill, so oftentimes the forecast called for a flock of ravens. This only grew more ridiculous with time thanks to release of Drag Principal Morfessa, the stride form, and Drag Fencer Dagda. The former was a stride granting 15k power, a critical, and a battle door to your entire front row, while Dagda could superior call 2 grade 1s from deck on attack. So when you checked stand triggers to restand Dagda, who could then call even more grade 1s, again all under the buffs from Morfessa, you can see that the opponent was in for a bad time. This particular combo was so strong in fact that it would push Luard to top tier competitor status in the premium metagame, topping at various events, including multiple tops at BRO tournaments. It's also one of the cards that pushed Morfessa to make top 2 in my top 10 Shadow Paladin boss list, so yeah, fear the Raven. Taking the bronze is a card that many might have expected to be number 2 or even number 1, and rightfully so because this card is something else, dude. The card in question is Angel Feather's own Doctoroid, Refros. Releasing in GPT-04 with Dreaming Dragon, Refros wreaked havoc with this skill. Act on the rear circle, generate your break 1. Counterblast 1 and put this card on top of your deck. Choose up to 2 cards from your damage zone. Put them on top of the deck and shuffle. For each card put with this effect, put the top card of your deck into your damage zone face up. Draw a card. Like with most of these stand triggers, the value of Refros came from some good old loop gaming. Now, like with Cursed Eye Raven, the aim was to loop Refros itself to rapidly exchange various cards in and out. In this case, it would be in and out of the damage zone, thus proccing the skills of various units like Gavriel and Nurse of Broken Heart for massive power-ups. Refros Loop also had other major benefits. It effectively doubled as a countercharger, as you could refresh 2 face-down damages with face-ups for the price of 1 face-down, and you could actively return triggers leading to trigger compression, a facet that was particularly powerful with Angel Feather's rescue check ability. And with the various ways to add back or call cards from damage, Refros was easy to access and proc multiple times, of course. So in many ways, it's like Raven, except it's ranking above the bird since it ended up getting restricted to 1 and has remained so for most of its life. And I wholeheartedly approve. At the number 2 spot is Dreamer Kruk. Yeah, no, that's not even a misprint. That's actually her name. Dreamer Kruk. Neat. Releasing in GCB01 Academy of Divas, Kruk had these skills. Auto on the van or rear, harmony. When the unit is placed in the same column as the unit, both units become in harmony until end of turn. Thank you, reminder text. Continuous on the rear circle, generation break 1. If this unit is in harmony, it gets auto on the rear. Put this unit on top of the deck. At the end of the battle, this unit boosted. You may pay the cost. If you do, choose one of your rear cards, return to the hand, choose up to 1 card from your hand, call to rear circle, and shuffle. Ah yes, it was about time Bermuda entered the scene. Releasing in the first ever G set for Bermuda, Kruk was a notorious multi-attack enabler for the deck, even as a rear guard. This card combo would basically all of BT and elevated the whole clan, albeit it wouldn't lead to any absurdity until the end of G leading into Premium. By then, this card would just blow up, especially in top tier decks like Anj the Wall and Coral. It was so ridiculous that it helped lead Anj to being the best deck in Premium despite it not even need to run V-Series cards. Yeah! And of course, making Coral's numbers, whose numbers are the second biggest thing about her, swing over and over and over again, which led to some pretty impossible game states, might I say. And of course, this isn't even considering the damage that would have come from force markers down the line. Thankfully, Kruk would be limited to 1, so it also in turn limited its abuse big time in Bermuda Triangle, and there it shall stay, because if it ever came off the limited list, we'd all be Kruked. Taking the crown as the most powerful, most impactful, and yes indeed, most degenerate stand trigger of all time is Goddess of Sound Sleep, Taro. Now, Taro's skills are as follows. Auto, Revelation, Rear Circle. When this card is placed on a specified circle, look at the top card of your deck and you may put that card into your soul. If you do, rest one of your rear cards. And now for the main effect. Auto Generation Break 1. Put this card on the bottom of your deck. When this card is put into the drop zone from your soul, you may pay the cost. If you do, choose one of your rear cards and stand it. Yeah, this card at number 1 is a no-brainer. Taro was the key component in multiple restand loops, most prominently being the dreaded Fenrir loop and Valkyrian loops, leading to a near unlimited number of attacks, each one being conducted by a PG-worthy Vanguard. And I mean for both decks, and perhaps even more decks other than just those 2 most prominent loops. Yeah, Taro was everywhere, if not everything for this clan for a while. Taro at base is also just ridiculous. If you know anything about Genesis, then you know this deck can soul blast a crap ton, even during the battle phase. Heck, maybe even especially the battle phase depending on the deck you're playing. The Revelation ability is low-key an afterthought by comparison, but it did help make her a neat call on rear circle to deck manipulate before putting her from rear into soul, or into drop then into soul, whatever floats your boat. So like Kruk, it's a restand enabler on steroids even as a rear circle, but since you could rapidly soul charge it, or put it from rear into soul, or return it from drop zone into soul with various effects, or even just put it to deck with other various effects, thank you kindly Dreaming Dragon, Taro was primed for abuse to an unprecedented degree. And just to further prove why Taro is the numero uno stand trigger, it's currently the only stand to be completely banned in premium format. Taro is a force of nature, dude. No matter where you saw her, she would inevitably lead to a restand, and thus she remains banned until the end of days, crying out for her long-lost lover Wise Man or Fenrir or Valkyrian to come save her, so they may once again dance the dance of infinite restands. But they shall not come for her, and we shall not weep. And that was the list. The legacy of stand triggers can best be described with this expression: the road to hell is paved with good intentions. At the onset, the stand trigger provided an alternative avenue to deck building, and the uniquely powerful skills of G-era stands provided interesting combos that also strengthened clan identity. However, stand triggers in both their trigger effects and unique effects became wholly exploitable, and, frankly, resulted in more trouble than they were worth. And as we can see, Bushiroad took this to heart. As stated before, the stand trigger would not be adapted to modern day formats, but Bushi also shunned the essence of the mechanic in other ways. First and most prominently is the existence of multi-attack as a game mechanic. Bushiroad learned this lesson the hard way twice, first with stands and then later with Excel markers with V-Series. The existence of extra attacks inherent to a format rather than to specific decks was problematic and became too hard to account for in balance, leading to a notable lack of generic multi-attack options in D-Series, barring a few gimmicky options. Triggers with unique effects would no longer appear either, as triggers with unique effects would be similarly difficult to account for with future card releases, resulting in more archetypal effects released that could easily be designed around. We could see this today with draw PGs in early V, all the way to effect triggers in D-Series like the fronts that go into Soul that were recently released. Finally, we can see an aversion to trigger recycling. With both the Legion mechanic and the stand triggers recycling themselves, Bushiroad would come to understand the raw power of trigger recursion. This would become incredibly scarce in future card design, with the vast majority of recycling being limited to normal units. When trigger recursion does occur, it's often very limited, such as Rezile only being able to return crits from drop as a part of his ultimate ability, the Divine Skill. Ultimately, stand triggers were a fun but damaging part of Vanguard's history, and the reverberations of their impact can be felt all the way to today in modern card design. So the next time you or your friend asks the question, could stand triggers return to format? Rest assured, the answer will always be a resounding no. Thanks for watching. As mentioned in the beginning, this video was a brief tangent to buy time for the Pale Moon top 10, not gonna lie. So if you're looking forward to that video, or you have another top 10 that you're looking forward to, then be sure to turn on that notification bell. I intend to complete the series as stated before, so you'll definitely want to set that bell so you don't miss out. In the meantime, if you have anything you liked or disliked about the list, or any ideas or suggestions for the next list, please comment down below. Trust me, I do read them. And check out my other videos in the meantime. I do top 10s like this, fight nights, tier lists, anime reactions, the whole shebang. And with that said, take care and God bless.